After the flooding following Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, neighborhood groups and nonprofits tapped both individual and collective resources for the recovery of their neighborhoods. This brief film introduces you to 5 New Orleans neighborhoods and to some of their local leadership. The interview excerpts you will see focus on what leaders identified as important in the recovery process, as well as on some of the strategies which benefited affluent and disadvantaged neighborhoods alike. Strategies include developing partnerships with other neighborhoods, churches, and nonprofits, collecting and utilizing data, and seeking out ways to work effectively with local government. Taken together, these 5 neighborhoods reflect the racial and economic makeup of the city. Lakeview is upper middle class and white. Gentilly Woods and Pontchartrain Park, also referred to as Pontilly, is middle class and predominantly African American. Central City is low income and mostly African American. Broadmoor is economically and racially diverse. And finally, the Upper Ninth Ward is working class and predominantly African American. These neighborhoods also reflect differing capacities for organization, and organizational capacity is largely a function of the combination of economic, human, and social capital in an area.
When I look at sort of in terms of neighborhood groups and civic voluntary associations, for the most part, I see there being almost like a xylophone. The xylophone represents the abilities or capacities of those groups. And so you have a few big bars of neighborhood organizations who over the past 3 years have been able to get the funding and organizational support and build the structure and really created something that is state-of-the-art even in other cities, but where a lot of the rest of the city lays is really in the low bar, low capacity, or medium capacity because of the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation being you're trying to recover your home, you're trying to recover your job, and on top of that, you're being asked to participate in at times a very unclear, ambiguous determination of what your neighborhood needs to be. What the fascinating thing to me is seeing people go through the process of trying to move themselves up 1 bar or 2 on the rung. And the motivation may be to get to be a Broadmoor neighborhood group or a Lakeview. I mean, that may be the draw for some. And for some it may just be, we just want normalcy in our neighborhood, and so they may have more modest aims. So there's a few different basic sort of factual demographic components you need to take into consideration.
What was life like in Lakeview? There was no civic association at that time.
Well, there was a civic association, but it had a very different role in the community at that time. Because interestingly enough, we're the oldest and the largest in the state, and because of that, it gives us more clout because our neighborhood is pretty homogeneous. Where you go to some of the other neighborhoods around the city, they have neighborhood associations, but they represent a much smaller number of people. So what has helped us to get a lot of things done and to have some political clout is the fact that we had so many people that were all in the same association. So we didn't realize how valuable that was going to be to us when the storm came.
You know, the wonderful thing about Pontilly working there is that they had a strong neighborhood association pre-Katrina. And because of that, immediately, even before they came back, they gathered back some of the leaders that with that association came back. They were contacting each other and planning on how they were going to rebuild their community. Basically, the residents in Pontilly were seniors. It's an African-American community that's been there since maybe in the 1950s, and it was established, as I understand it, was the first suburb for African-Americans, possibly in the United States, I know in New Orleans. And so it's very historic. The Central City Partnership, which I'm a chair of, has been around since around 1994, so we were pre-Katrina. Of course, the contrast between Central City and Pontilly is that, as I said, You had a lot of elderly people that own their own homes. Here in Central City, it's more diverse. We have very, very few home ownership. It's becoming even more diverse after Katrina. Yes, there are challenges. There's crime. There are problems with the housing. Like this, the Pontilli Association, what they're doing, Central City Partnership, what we're doing. I think it's just so vital that we are working. If it has to be on our own, hey, we're going to get the job done one way or another. We're not just dependent upon the city, because if we just depend on the city, I think we're going to be in bad shape.
Well, and I think that it has everything to do with the organization being in the trenches before Katrina. No, we were 47% owner occupied before Katrina. Yeah, less than half. So we really are a microcosm of the city of New Orleans, demographically and socioeconomically.
So you didn't even have that advantage?
No, didn't have that advantage. Yeah, and you look at, like, you know, you said contracts with Lakeview, well, the majority of that was the home ownership.
Did the Upper Ninth Ward have a neighborhood association? I mean, was Bunny
No,
Friend?
not that I ever knew of. Bunny Friend didn't have a neighborhood association because I didn't have to deal with this before Katrina.
Yeah.
Before the storm, it was just going to work every day, living every day, not worrying about nothing. But after the storm, there was so much destruction and so quiet, and we all wanted to come home. So how could I not want to do what I'm doing and feel comfortable doing it? You know what I'm saying?
So we have schools, we have the religious element, we have the political element. So building all those relationships, I think, is the key in collaboration, being open, not being totally unto yourself. That capacity is widened when you are able to work together.
You know, housing initiatives that we're implementing now, looking at building 25 new LEED certified homes through our partnership with the Salvation Army and Varnu.
Model. And I think a very important thing that Hal talks about is identifying your religious institution as an essential partner, because they have built-in networks, built-in usually a space, locations, additional bodies through their parishioners and membership. So it makes a big difference that way to partner with a faith-based organization.
Oh, yes, yes. What we did was, there's another person, another organization that works with NPN also, and we partnered together because they have a church over here, and we had Road Home come into our area to assist the residents because they couldn't get the help nowhere else.
Okay. Another organization that came about right after the storm, Lakeview Civic was in existence before, and our role was to act on behalf of the whole community, and we were not really equipped to be able to deal with individual problems. So Denise Thornton created an organization called the Beacon of Hope, and what that group did was deal with homeowner-specific issues. So when we were out there planning on what are we going to do with Harrison Avenue, and what is the zoning going to be for building higher, and how we're going to manage a base flood elevation, Beacon of Hope was out there saying we need to help people that are trying to figure out how to navigate through getting their home built. So they were there helping to find contractors to make sure they weren't using corrupt electricians that we found out that were operating in the neighborhood. How would you get a permit to rebuild your home, or how would you get an electrical permit if you just had to do electrical work? So that group formed on its own
In Lakeview.
And was comprised of residents in Lakeview. And it ended up having its own separate life while we had ours. And last year, as the neighborhood got more and more people back, we realized that these two organizations were almost going to start bumping into each other. So what we did is we got our boards and their board together and said, okay, we need to figure out how to work this out. And the solution we came up with is that once the neighborhood reached critical mass, which is right around that 50% repopulation, that we need to assume the responsibilities that they had picked up that we couldn't deal with as Lakeview Civic under our organization to allow the Beacon of Hope to go to other neighborhoods.
We were developing the model that I really didn't understand but at the time. But all the parts and pieces could be transferable to another neighborhood.
Our model is not intended to be the long-term answer. Once we feel an area reaches critical mass, and that could be a couple of different things, we look at occupancy, and then we also look at, do they have a stable social structure in place, a civic association that can take over, and that coalition can, you know, evolve into that civic association. Lakeview, the coalition is now considered a beacon outreach team on the LCIA, which is the Lakeview Civic Improvement Association. So they have reached that critical mass. Last year, I think it was, is when we turned them over to the LCIA. So then we started focusing our efforts in other neighborhoods, or our neighboring neighborhoods, kind of sticking to our neighbors helping neighbors.
We, through that block captain program I talked about earlier, we have a survey that we do quarterly. We're in the middle of doing it right now, that block captains walk every single block of Lakeview, and there's a form that fills out that says, is this house occupied? Is it gutted and not inhabited? Is it ungutted? Is it with weeds? And we have all of these categories.
How can I use these materials? So I can take your data that I have with the book that I have from the assessor's office and see who's who, who's back. How is this gonna work with this tool that I have? So yes, data is very important.
One, we need to know what our needs are of our people, regardless of where they fall economically. And we started to build our database. We knew earlier on we were collecting all this data. It needed to be in a place where it could be managed and therefore used. And so we were collecting data, we were storing the data, and we were just positioning ourselves so when the program did come, because we knew something was coming, had to, but we would be ready to receive it.
You're making a smart investment if you're spending a few dollars on helping groups articulate the types of changes they want to make in their neighborhood, make them more capable to pursue it outside of government funding and processes. And then when they do work with you on a government level, be more efficient and more capable of being a good partner.
Government. So that now we're the government, you know, and a different version of that is something that we used with the New Orleans Institute that was forming up, was this phrase, we're the ones we've been waiting for. It's more of a recognition that we're responsible for creating the norms that are going to meet the needs of our people. And we can't anymore blame something outside of ourselves, because we are the government and we need to resource it, we need to set the policy for it, and we need to hold each other accountable.
As we think about rebuilding New Orleans, we can think about it in broad terms, but in many instances things come from the ground and they bubble up as opposed to up and then bubbling down. And when they ask us how we're doing it, I tell them we're doing it any way that we can. And that the only things that work, the only thing that produces a good result on the streets of New Orleans right now are partnerships, openness, making sure that we're all staying in touch with each other and communicating. The way they say that in Washington is public-private partnerships. What we say down here is we're all in it together.
Well, you know, they're doing the Citizen Participation Project is really similar to what we do as Central City Partnership. I think they have to be careful to make sure that they're just not another arm of the city government and they are dictated to by the mayor or whomever. But I think it's a great thing whenever citizens can participate and can have a voice in what is happening in the community.
But it wouldn't reduce the need for the real neighborhood association?
Absolutely not. No, I think there's always a need for the neighborhood associations. Again, there's their element of independence. You're hearing from the real people, so to speak. And I'm hoping that the Citizen Participation Project is going to be along those same lines, but certainly we don't want to get rid of our neighborhood associations.